photosynthesis uses light energy so that plants can make their own food. One of the things that commonly people think incorrectly is that, well, you know, we eat food and plants eat dirt. Right? That must be what it is. We eat food, they eat dirt. Let's see. Let's see if plants really eat dirt. There was a beautiful experiment, one of my favorite experiments that I talk about, carried out in the year 1600 by Jean-Baptiste van Helmont. Now, I never asked names of people, and I never asked dates. This is not a history class. History classes would ask dates and people. Science classes don't care about the person or the date. They care about what they discovered. All right? And he carried out a beautifully elegant experiment in 1600, and we can see it on G3. So let's look on G3 at the top. This is a beautifully simple and elegant experiment to see if plants are really eating dirt. What he did in the year 1600 is he took a little tree, right? Didn't have any. He took it out of the ground, right? And he took this little tiny willow tree. He weighed it, and it weighed 5 pounds. And he also weighed the dirt, the soil, in this pot, and it weighed 200 pounds. And then he planted this little willow tree in the soil, and for the next 5 years, all that he did was water the tree. What's going to happen to this little tree over the next 5 years? It's going to grow. It's going to grow bigger. So 5 years later, the tree is much bigger than it was. He now very carefully removes this much larger tree from the soil, removing all the soil from the roots, and he reweighs the tree. And he also reweighs the soil. The tree weighs 170 pounds. The soil weighs 199.8 pounds. So here's what we're saying. The tree originally weighed 5 pounds, and now it weighs 170 pounds. So how much weight has the tree gained in 5 years? 170 minus 5, it's gained 165 pounds. Right? We know how much it weighed when it started. We reweighed it 5 years later. It's gained 165 pounds. What happened to the soil? The soil originally weighed 200 pounds. He reweighed it 5 years later. It weighs 199.8 pounds. How much weight did the soil lose? 0.2 of a pound. Where the hell did the tree come from? Is that amazing? So obviously, if the tree is eating soil, dirt, at most, it's only extracting a very small amount of the weight of the dirt. At most, 0.2 of a pound. So at most, out of the increased weight of the tree, which has gained 165 pounds in weight, only a maximum of 0.2 of a pound is due to minerals in the soil. So most of that growth of the tree seems to have come out of literally thin air. How did that happen? Well, let's take a look at page G2. This is on G2, photosynthesis. Let's get our orientation. It's something we've already learned. What this shows on G2 is that photosynthesis uses 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, CO2, plus 6 molecules of water, H2O, plus sunlight energy. We ever learned this before? Yes. And then it uses chlorophyll to absorb that light energy. And there are a whole bunch of enzymes and coenzymes to cause a chemical reaction. The result of combining carbon dioxide and water and light energy is that it forms organic molecules like glucose, C6H12O6, and it also forms, as a byproduct, 6 molecules of oxygen. Now, I've written some other stuff here. I'll come back to that. But the main thing is just, this part right here that we've already learned. So, think about it then. how is the plant making organic molecules like sugars and proteins and fats? It's making them out of carbon dioxide from the air and water. Does everybody see that? So when a tree is growing, it's made up of, what are the kinds of chemicals that make up all living things? Carbohydrates, fats, proteins, nucleic acids. And what are all these organic chemicals that a plant or any other living thing are made of? In the case of the plant, how did it make these organic compounds? Out of carbon dioxide from the air and water. Well, carbon dioxide's in the air, not in the dirt. And water is just, we're watering the plant, or it's the rain's falling, but that's not the dirt. So in fact, that increased weight of the plant, which is now made up of all these carbs and fats and proteins and nucleic acids, was all formed largely by photosynthesis, and it had nothing to do with what was in the dirt. Everybody follow that? So it's not like the plant just eats the mud, and now that mud's part of the plant. It did extract a few minerals, 0.2 of a pound, but it gained 165 pounds in weight, and only 0.2 of a pound can be attributed to minerals in the soil. Everything else came from carbon dioxide and water. So now we've, just to complete this diagram, since some of you are writing it anyhow, here's basically the idea of photosynthesis, trying to keep it as simple as I can, and I really am. Glucose and other organic molecules are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. Everybody see that? That's glucose. Now, so that means that if the plant is going to form organic molecules like sugars, glucose, it needs a source of carbon atoms, hydrogen atoms, and oxygen atoms to make it. It gets the carbon atoms from carbon dioxide. Does everybody see that? And it gets the oxygen atoms also from carbon dioxide. The hydrogen atoms come from the water. So look, what the plant is doing is it's taking the carbon dioxide and using it as a source of carbon atoms and oxygen atoms. It takes the hydrogen atoms from the water. Now, there is a very important coenzyme that is needed to transfer hydrogen atoms, and the name of that coenzyme is NADP. We won't ask you to know what NADP stands for. It stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. But this is a coenzyme, and it simply transfers the hydrogens from the water onto the carbon dioxide. So now, if you add the hydrogen atoms from the water and the carbon and oxygen atoms from the carbon dioxide, if you combine them in the right amounts, can you see how you can get sugars made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen? Now, if in order to make the sugar, if it was using carbons from carbon dioxide, oxygen from carbon dioxide, and hydrogens from water, that means that the plant isn't using the oxygen in water. So what happens to the oxygen in the water? It's released as oxygen or O2 into the air. That's where the oxygen that is given off by plants comes from, is the oxygen that was in water that isn't being used. Now, to use terminology that we have given to you that you needed to know already, what is oil rig? Oxidation is a loss of hydrogen atoms and reduction is a gain. This is an oxidation-reduction reaction. You'd say, how so? Can you see that carbon dioxide is gaining hydrogens? So if you attach hydrogen atoms onto carbon dioxide, we say it's reduced. Reduction is a gain of hydrogens. So carbon dioxide is reduced into glucose. Now, water is losing its hydrogens. The hydrogens are coming off the water. So when a molecule loses hydrogens, we say it's oxidized. Oxidation is a loss. So water is oxidized into oxygen. Water is oxidized into oxygen. What does oxidized mean? Oxidation is a loss of hydrogens. Carbon dioxide is reduced into glucose. What does reduced mean? It gains hydrogens. So this is an oxidation-reduction reaction. All that's happened is those hydrogens have been transferred from the water to the carbon dioxide, forming an organic molecule, and this explains how it is that plants give off oxygen into the atmosphere. Now, we're going to have more to say about this, but we know what carbon dioxide is. We understand water. We understand glucose. We understand oxygen. Really, of all the things that we've written here, the one thing that we probably don't know much about is what the heck is sunlight? Right? Because we've talked about all these other chemicals before. So let's address that. I mean, I know we're thinking, of course I know what light is. Do you? Let's see. On G1, so our question is, what is light energy? Now, of course, remember that your definition, if you're going to define something, you cannot use the same word in your definition. You can't say, well, you know what light is? Light is, light. That's not a definition, it's a tautology. It means nothing. So, light is a form of electromagnetic radiation. That's what light is, electromagnetic radiation. Now, there are many types of electromagnetic radiation. And they're called electromagnetic because they have both principles of electricity and magnetism. We're going to show you some of the various types. All forms of electromagnetic radiation travel at the same speed, which is commonly called the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles a second. All right? So all forms of electromagnetic radiation travel at the speed of light. Now, I've given you terms, wavelength, amplitude, and frequency. And I also indicated that the higher the frequency, the higher the energy level. To help us understand this, let's look at page G4. This is page G4. Now, where we're going with this is in the middle of G4, we're going to talk about different types of electromagnetic radiation. Right? Because even though you thought you knew what light is, maybe you're not so sure anymore. We're going to be learning that there's something called gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, visible light rays, infrared, microwave, and radio waves, and electricity. All of these are called electromagnetic radiation. All of these. I'm going to walk you through all these. You certainly have heard of X-rays, you've heard of ultraviolet rays, you've heard of radio waves. You've heard of electricity, you've heard of light. They are all electromagnetic, and they are all traveling at 186,000 miles a second. Now, before I can tell you more about that, I first have to give you a few definitions. This shows 3 different electromagnetic waves. You can see they seem to vary from one another. Now, what is wavelength? Wavelength is defined as the distance between the top of one wave to the top of the next wave. That's called the wavelength. The amplitude is how tall the wave is. That's the amplitude. The frequency, as I wrote right here, is the number of waves per second. The number of waves per second. So looking at these 3 waves, which wave has the longest wavelength of the 3, A, B, or C? The longest wavelength. A. Which one has the shortest wavelength? C. That's the shortest distance between the top of 2 waves. Which of these, A, B, or C, has the highest amplitude? B. That's the tallest one. Which one has the highest frequency? C. Now, most important of these 3 is frequency, because what we're going to learn is the higher the frequency, the higher the energy level. So, the last comment for today, and we'll pick this up next week, is that what we're going to be learning is that gamma rays have an extremely high frequency and therefore a high energy level, and as you move along this spectrum, you have a lower and lower frequency and a lower energy level. On the electromagnetic spectrum, first off, there are many types of electromagnetic waves. All of them travel as a wave. All of them travel at the same speed, 186,000 miles a second, commonly referred to as the speed of light. But what they differ essentially in is their frequency and therefore their energy level. So those types of electromagnetic radiation, this is page G4, that have the highest frequency and therefore the highest energy level are referred to as gamma rays or cosmic rays. These have extremely high frequencies, extremely high energy levels. Now, whether we call them gamma rays or cosmic rays has to do with their source, because they come from two major sources. They either come from radioactive isotopes, such as uranium. So if we had a chunk of radioactive uranium, we have learned previously that radioactive isotopes emit or give off not only protons and neutrons, but also emit energy in the form of sometimes gamma rays. So certain types of radioactive isotopes emit or give off gamma rays. I would encourage you to go back to section C and review what we learned about in terms of radioactive isotopes. The other source of these high energy waves is from the cosmos, more specifically stars. So stars give off these gamma rays. And when the source is the stars, they call them cosmic rays. They are the same thing as gamma rays. Now, these are extremely high energy. And if you were exposed to gamma rays, they would simply move right through your entire body, passing through every part of your body, including your bones and teeth. And as they travel through your body at the speed of light, anything they hit, they would shatter. So they literally will shatter or fry the organic molecules in your body, literally breaking apart your proteins, your DNA, everything. So you don't want to really be exposed to very much of these gamma rays, is the idea. We might ask, what would it take to shield us or protect us from gamma rays? And it would take about a foot of solid lead. So you'd have to, if you were exposed to gamma rays, you'd have to be standing behind a wall of about a foot thick of solid lead to absorb those gamma rays so that you wouldn't be harmed. I guess since the Avengers movie is coming out soon, the Hulk the character Hulk is Bruce Banner, a physicist who is exposed to gamma rays and periodically turns into the Hulk. You will not turn into the Hulk. You will just be dead. I don't know why Bruce Banner becomes the Hulk instead of why he's not dead, but it's a good comic book story. Now, at a slightly lower frequency and lower energy level are X-rays. And we've certainly all heard of X-rays. Now, stars not only give off these gamma or cosmic rays, stars, including our sun, emit or give off all forms of electromagnetic radiation. Gamma rays, ultraviolet rays, visible light, radio waves, microwaves. So all stars emit all of these. I know I've asked this before. Has anybody had an astronomy class? Anybody who's had an astronomy remember them talking about not only light telescopes but radio telescopes, and that can pick up radio waves and ultraviolet and X-rays and so on. So stars give off all forms of electromagnetic radiation. But the source of X-rays that we're most familiar with are X-ray machines that doctors and dentists use. Now, X-rays are not as powerful as gamma rays. When exposed to X-rays, they will go through all parts of your body except they cannot get through your bones and teeth. And so therefore, if you pass X-rays through somebody's body, you get a photographic image of their bones or teeth. That's called a film, an X-ray film. So doctors use that to see if your bones are broken, because it makes the bones show up. The bones are made up of calcium mineral, which absorbs these X-rays. It can't get through the bone. Dentists use X-rays to see if there are holes in your teeth or cavities. So they are used in medicine and in dentistry to see if there are breaks or holes in your bones or teeth. But any part, if you were exposed to very much X-rays, and obviously they try to expose you to very little for just a very short blast of it, but if you were exposed to any a significant amount of X-rays for any length of time, it would have the same result as gamma rays. It would just take a little bit longer to kill you. But this is why, if you go to the dentist and they aim that cone-shaped device right at your head to take some X-rays of your mouth, what does the dental hygienist or the technician do before they turn on the machine? They get the hell out of that room, which always makes me feel so reassured, knowing that they don't want to even be in that room when they turn on that machine. Now, what comes next in frequency, lower frequency and lower energy level, are ultraviolet rays. And ultraviolet rays are lower energy. They can only get through our skin. They can't even pass through our entire body, but they can pass through the layers of our skin. And they can damage, just like gamma rays, just like X-rays, they can shatter the organic molecules, the proteins and the DNA in our skin cells. And that leads to things including sunburn, and we've all at one time or another probably gotten too much ultraviolet rays from the sun and had a sunburn or a skin burn. And depending upon how much you get, it can really burn your skin severely. And if you repeatedly are exposed to ultraviolet rays excessively, it will cause skin cancer because it alters or mutates. It shatters the DNA in your skin cells, increasing your risk of skin cancer. The leading cause of skin cancer is too much ultraviolet rays from the sun. This is especially more important if you're fair skinned because you have less melanin pigment, that brown colored protein, to absorb the harmful ultraviolet rays.
Wasn't the skin cells dead though because they're exposed?
Only the top skin cells. Okay. The deeper skin cells are still alive, and this will penetrate through your entire layer of skin. That's the ultraviolet. Now, what comes next is visible light. And we're going to spend more time on visible light in just a moment. But you'll notice that here they've expanded the visible light part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And you can see with the highest frequency and highest energy level is violet light. And then there would be blue and green and yellow and orange and red. So that they are listed in decreasing frequency and decreasing energy level. We'll come back to visible light in just a moment. What comes next on the electromagnetic spectrum with a lower frequency and lower energy level than visible light is infrared rays. And we're going to group infrared and microwaves and radar waves together. So we're just going to group those three together. They're pretty similar. Now, infrared or microwaves or radar waves cannot get through your body. What they can do is they warm up water. They cause water molecules to vibrate, which we perceive or interpret as heat. So in fact, with the difference between a glass of cold water and a glass of hot water is how fast the water molecules in that glass are vibrating. And we perceive that as heat or temperature. And so if you take a glass of water and put it in a microwave oven and turn it on, what do the microwaves do to that glass of water? They heat it up. That's about all they can do. Obviously, if you were exposed to too much microwaves, though, it would warm up your body. But it's not shattering the organic molecules like ultraviolet rays and X-rays and certainly gamma rays do. We use all three of these terms interchangeably, whether we talk about a microwave oven or a radar range or infrared. It all has to do with causing an increase in heat. Now, what comes next with a lower frequency and lower energy level than even microwaves are radio waves. And that's what's listed here. And there are different types of radio waves according to this spectrum. The higher frequency, higher energy level are called UHF, then VHF, then FM, and then AM radio waves. Now, UHF and VHF are actually used to send or transmit TV signals. So we all are familiar with UHF channels, like channel 28 and 34 and 56 and those kind of channels. And then we have the lower frequency, lower energy VHF channels, like channels 2 and 4 and 7 and 13. Anybody know what UHF and VHF stand for? Ultra high frequency and very high frequency. Now these are ultra high frequency or very high frequency radio waves. They are not ultra high compared to gamma rays. Gamma rays are extremely much higher frequency, a much higher energy level than ultra high frequency radio waves or very high frequency radio waves. At a lower frequency and lower energy level are FM radio waves and AM radio waves. So I'll explain what FM and AM means in just a moment, but let's get a sense of the frequency. I wrote some examples of an example each of an FM radio station and an AM radio station, somewhat arbitrarily. So if you've heard of KISS FM, so it's 102.7. And if you actually look at the FM radio dial, have you ever noticed that it has an MHZ written there? What do you think that stands for? Megahertz. Now a hertz is another name for a wave or a cycle. So it's named after Dr. Hertz, who did a research on this. So literally a mega means a million and hertz means waves per second. So if they say that the FM frequency of KISS FM is 102.7 megahertz, it's 102,700,000 waves per second. Now, yeah, I'm certainly not asking you to memorize the frequency of KISS FM, but what I want to impress upon you is that if an FM radio signal is 102,700,000 waves per second, you can imagine what light rays or ultraviolet or X-rays and certainly gamma ray frequencies are. They're extremely high. They are not measured in millions, but in literally 10 to the 12th. It's literally trillions upon trillions upon trillions of waves per second. That is this extremely high frequencies that creates that very powerful energy that they're able to exert. Incidentally, just going back a second, something I should have mentioned, I had said that to protect you from gamma rays, it would take about a foot thick of lead. How about to protect us or shield us from X-rays? So it takes about a quarter of an inch of lead. So when you've gone to the dentist, you know that they cover your body, especially your reproductive organs, with that lead apron that's got about a quarter-inch thick of lead to absorb the harmful X-rays. So again, we don't want them, because they will go through all parts of your body except bones and teeth. That's X-rays. All right, anyhow, these are much lower frequency, even though they're still extremely high frequency. So if an FM station's waves are measured in millions of waves per second, an example of an AM station is KNX FM. That's 1070. And if you've ever looked at an AM dial, you'll see it says KHZ. And just as M stands for mega, and people taking lab know mega means a million, K stands for kilo, and people taking lab know that kilo stands for 1,000. So kilohertz. So when we say the KNX AM radio is 1070 or 1070 on the dial, it's actually 1,070,000 waves per second. Well, 1,070,000 is still a lot less than KISS FM, which is 102,700,000. So FM radio waves are measured in megahertz, millions of waves per second, whereas AM is measured in thousands of waves per second. Now, as far as this business about FM and AM radio, does anybody know what FM or AM stands for? Yeah, frequency modulation and amplitude modulation. Let me give you a little bit of an introduction to how this works. This is not biology, but we'll just mention it. So there are two ways of sending a radio signal, either AM or FM. And let me first explain how this works as far as sending a signal. So here I've drawn an amazing picture of a microphone. All right? Now, of course, you speak into a microphone. I got a microphone right here I'm speaking into. And what a microphone does is it converts sound waves, and I'm creating sound right now, and the microphone converts the sound waves into an electromagnetic signal. It turns it into an electromagnetic signal. Now, how a microphone works is it actually has a magnet inside it. And it actually basically causes this magnet to be set into motion and vibrate, and that creates an electromagnetic signal. Now, I'll come back to that concept in a moment. Now, at a radio station, they have an antenna and they transmit that electromagnetic signal. And that electromagnetic signal is transmitted, and it's either transmitted as an FM radio wave or an AM radio wave. I'll explain the difference in a moment. Now, you have a radio. Your radio can pick up radio waves. And what your radio does is it converts either the FM radio wave or the AM radio wave. It converts it back into sound using a speaker. If anybody has ever broken open a speaker, there's a magnet inside it. And a speaker does the exact reverse of what a microphone does. What did we say a microphone did? It converts sound waves into an electromagnetic signal. What does a speaker do? It converts an electromagnetic signal into a sound. And they both have a magnet. It's just that one's converting sound into an electromagnetic signal, and the speaker is converting an electromagnetic signal back into sound. So, we could even write that what comes out, obviously, the speaker is sound. So it's just converting the EM signal back into sound. Now, so that's really all that's going on between the microphone and your speaker. It's first turned into an electromagnetic signal, it's transmitted, and your radio converts the electromagnetic signal using the speaker back into sound waves. Now, there are two ways of sending this electromagnetic signal. There's what's called AM and FM radio signals. Now, when I speak, when we create sound, we can either turn these variations in sound, these variations in pitch, into changes in amplitude in the electromagnetic signal, or changes in frequency in the electromagnetic signal. So as I change my voice and change the pitch, in an AM radio signal, these variations in the sound of my voice are causing changes in the amplitude of the radio wave. The frequency stays constant, but the amplitude changes. What an AM radio does is it converts these variations in amplitude into variations back into sound. It's just going in the reverse. Now, an FM radio signal, basically, you can convert the changes in my voice into changes in frequency rather than amplitude. So in this case, the amplitude is the same, but there are changes in the frequency. Here it's slower frequency, here it's higher frequency, and slower frequency, it's higher frequency. And what an FM radio and speaker does, is it converts these variations in frequency back into variations in sound. So there's simply just two different ways of sending this radio signal, either by varying the amplitude, called an AM radio signal, or variations in frequency, called an FM, frequency modulation signal. Now, we're talking about converting sound waves into electromagnetic waves, radio waves. Now, I wrote that sound waves travel at about 700 miles an hour. Radio waves, electromagnetic waves, or radio waves travel at the same speed that light does, 186,000 miles per second. So sound is not the same as an electromagnetic wave. So this is why we're all familiar with this idea that when there is a thunder and lightning storm, we will see the flash of lightning, and then we start to wait to hear if there's thunder, if it creates thunder as well. Because the thunder, which is sound, is traveling much, much more slowly than that light, that flash of light, which is traveling thousands of miles per second, whereas sound is traveling hundreds of miles per hour. Furthermore, nobody can go faster than the speed of light, at least according to Einstein, and so far he's the expert. Nobody has been able to demonstrate that anything could go faster than the speed of light. But you can go faster than the speed of sound. And so when a plane goes faster than 700 miles an hour, it creates a sonic boom, and it's actually going faster than the speed of sound. That would be commonly known as Mach 1. And so while we don't have any commercial jets that are flying faster than the speed of sound currently, and that's because people didn't want these sonic booms created by passenger planes, commercial planes. Military aircraft do fly not only 1, but 2, and sometimes even close to 3 times the speed of sound. So when you're looking at an F-16, they are really moving, twice the speed of sound, but still nothing close to the speed of light. The only thing that can go faster than the speed of light is a warp drive engine on Star Trek. But that's still science fiction. All right, and that allowed them to go when they were going warp 10 or warp whatever. That's how many times faster than the speed of light they were traveling. But that's totally science fiction, at least to the best of our knowledge. So, just to repeat, in terms of this, all of these things listed here are forms of electromagnetic waves. And that includes gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, infrared, microwaves, TV waves, radio waves, and we're going to mention electrical current in a moment. These are all traveling at 186,000 miles a second. They are called electromagnetic. Sound is not listed here. Nowhere do you see in this list sound, because sound waves are not electromagnetic waves. They are traveling 700 miles an hour, which is not even close to 186,000 miles per second. Yep?
What about gravitational pull of black holes and stuff like that?
What about it?
I said, doesn't that suck up light?
Well, what do you mean? So sucking up light, it just means that the gravitational pull prevents photons of light from leaving that source. But that has nothing to do with affecting speed. So if you're interested in that stuff, I'd recommend a course in astronomy or an introductory course in physics. It's really interesting to hear about that and how we get into all that kind of stuff. The last type of electromagnetic wave is electricity. And that's the electricity that's traveling in the wires of this building. So electricity is moving at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second. Now the electricity, we might ask, what's the frequency of these electromagnetic waves traveling in a wire? And it's really a very, very low frequency. It's 60 cycles per second, 60 waves per second. So 60 waves per second compared to even the frequency of radio waves, which was here 102 million waves per second, is much, much slower. So that's called electricity. All right, all of these are forms of electromagnetic radiation. All right, this is a course in biology. It's not a course in physics, so you might wonder, why did I talk about it at all? And I talked about it because for most of us in this class, this is the last science class you hope to ever, ever, ever take. And this is your last chance to ever learn anything about science and technology. And we live in a world of increasingly sophisticated science and technology. And unfortunately, the average layperson isn't keeping up with the way in which society is changing in terms of technology. So we try to handle devices, and we're really almost losing track of what's going on as far as these complexities of these devices. So what's happening is there's a few really smart people who create these, and the vast majority of people barely know how to operate them. All right? It's like when you get an instruction manual for even a cell phone or anything else, nobody's read any of these things. The old proverbial question, how do you even, program anything or make it work, is like almost nobody knows. You have to get somebody who's an expert in computers now to help you with your home computer because of the sophistication. But anyhow, at least you've got a little bit of better sense of some of this and how it works. Now, let's go back to page G1.
Professor Fink,
Yep.
what are the waves that are around here? Like, they say everywhere there's waves?
Yes, this room has radio waves passing through it at this moment. But radio waves have, to the best of our knowledge, no effect on our body.
But they're everywhere.
They are everywhere. Your cell phone, right? They're microwaves, constant, everywhere. But to the best of our knowledge, they don't have any effect on our body. There's been concerns that microwaves and radio waves might have an effect, but so far they haven't been able to document that they do. Right? I mean, a good, cautious, prudent approach would be don't have your cell phone right next to your head 24 hours a day. Right? But we haven't been able to prove that it causes any damage.
So those fall into the category of gamma rays?
What?
An example of what's a gamma ray?
What's a gamma ray? We said that's emitted by radioactive isotopes.
But that's only like up in the...
Well, that's if you have a chunk of uranium. Do you have a chunk of uranium or radioactive isotope? So I would encourage you to go back to section C and review when we learned about radioactive isotopes like uranium. All right, now, now that we've talked about, so we've tried to explain a little bit about what light is. Light is a form of electromagnetic radiation. Incidentally, I do have a video linked on my website that reviews the electromagnetic spectrum, and I would encourage you to watch it. It's a short video on YouTube, and I think you'll find it really interesting, and it's got nice graphics and so on that depict electromagnetic waves to help you understand it. We've talked about wavelength, amplitude, and frequency. The waves per second, how many waves per second, that's called frequency. Waves per second is also referred to as cycles per second, or CPS, cycles per second, or hertz. So that's why we talked about megahertz or kilohertz. That's the number of millions of waves or thousands of waves per second. And the higher the frequency, the higher the energy level.